Hey, Dad?
Oh, that's me. Oh, yeah, there you go.
You got a Spider-Man bag.
Oh, Spider-Man, yeah, I did, but I can't find it, so there you go, pumpkins!
Oh.
Yay!
Yay, Jack-o'-lantern.
Yeah.
Favorite. I like your Batman costume.
Oh, thanks, son.
It's kind of creepy, though. You kind of look evil.
Yeah, well, I'm not evil. I'm just a different Batman. You know, I'm Azrael Batman. Azrael Batman is awesome, okay? He's willing to do stuff that regular Batman is not willing to do.
Like killing people?
Exactly like killing people, yeah.
Then how's he not a bad guy?
Well, you see, son, sometimes you have to do bad things in order to make good things happen.
Oh.
Yeah, and besides, you're the evil one. I mean, look at you. You're dressed as Tiny Adam West. Tiny Adam West is horrifying.
You're scared of Tiny Adam West?
No, I'm not scared of Tiny Adam West.
Ooh, I'm Tiny Adam West. I've got a giant chin and creepy eyeballs. Fear me.
Ah, stop it! Stop it!
Okay.
So, sorry, I never thought I'd see the day where I'd had to take Tiny Adam West out trick-or-treating.
Well, I never thought I'd go trick-or-treating with evil Batman.
I'm not evil Batman, okay? I'm just a different Batman. In fact, I'm better than the original. I'm an improvement.
No, you're not.
Dear melodramatic windbag, here is your review for Vengeance of Bane, a comic I'm assuming you chose for me to review first, not only because it informs Bane's character for the Nightfall story, but because you're probably getting a kick out of my reading all about this menacing, merciless villain while knowing nothing at all about you. And yeah, I remember you're saying that my back break has happened already, and the next 48 hours is supposed to be my healing process, which would make my Bane Doomsvents and my back break the traumatic ordeal of Spawn Year I never recovered from. But I just want you to know I'm not afraid of you. Because there's no way you're as intelligent, trained, toned, ruthless, or committed as this guy. You're probably not even as intelligent, trained, toned, ruthless, or committed as Doomsvents. I'm playing your game because I don't have much choice right now, but this looks like a cinch compared to the hell I went through last time. For one thing, the material doesn't make me want to pull my brain out through my nose, and it's nice to know for sure this time that I'm not hallucinating, in a coma, in a virtual reality, or a dead person. You know, unless I never woke up the first time, and my entire life since Spawn Year is one really, really long, elaborate coma nightmare. And if that turns out to be true, if I ever finally wake up, I'm never reading 90s comics ever again. But I'm glad I'm starting with Vengeance of Bane because it gives me a sense of perspective. Hard not to feel better about my own situation after reading about Bane and the hell he went through. He was born in a prison to pay for his father's crimes and participating in an attempted revolution in Santa Prisca. He sees his mother die when he's a child, he's put in general population, sees death too early and is quickly hardened, kills a man before he's a teenager, goes into a month-long coma where he's hunted by a giant bat creature, spends 4,000 days in solitary confinement, then gets experimented on by scientists and develops a drug addiction. I don't know what I ever complained about. Although at least Bane wasn't forced to review Spawn comics while he was in that 5x10 cell for over a decade. I don't think anyone could survive that. On the other hand, at least I didn't have to catch and eat raw fish. I have read Paul Dini's Nightfall novelization and stray issues here and there, so I know the overarching story, and happily you didn't find some way to erase my memory this time, but I'm fuzzy on a lot of the details, and was only anecdotally aware of Bane's backstory. Finally experiencing it firsthand is an absolute treat, heart-wrenching and chilling though it might be. Chuck Dixon and Graham Nolan create an inspired, tragic foil for Batman, who is deserving of this treatment before he and Batman go toe-to-toe. It's counterintuitive to introduce a villain as the protagonist of his own story this way, so much so that it's a pretty rare and now sought-after issue because it didn't sell well when it was released. No one really knew what Bane was or how important he would soon become with Nightfall. In hindsight, it probably would have been smarter business to introduce Bane in Nightfall as the mysterious boogeyman who wants to break the bat for unknown reasons, and then reveal his history and motivations with this oversized one-shot after he breaks Bruce's back. It certainly would have sold more copies. And it could have been exactly the same story. Who could have guessed, at the time, that Bane would become one of the most popular and long-lasting of Batman's rogues gallery? But if this comic had been in the Nightfall sequence proper, he may not have unfairly garnered the Doomsday reputation of being invented as simply a plot device to take our titular hero out of his own book. Supervillain origin stories are usually handled in flashback over a couple of pages, with the villain himself or someone else explaining how he became his menacing self to somebody unseen. And regardless of how interesting or compelling some of those origins might be, they often come across as generic throwaway backstory, because bad guys have to come from somewhere. Often, we come up with a villain motif, and then we have to come up with a retroactive excuse to get him in that scarecrow or question mark or quilt suit. For the most part, and partly because it's given this full-on comic novella treatment, Bane organically evolves into the man and monster he is by Nightfall, and he's made as sympathetic as he is terrifying because we live in his mad, cruel world from beginning to end. This reads like a standalone psychological thriller before it's a supervillain origin story, even though it takes place over a long period of time, from Bane's infancy to adulthood. Horror/thriller fans might appreciate it regardless of their interest in Batman. If nothing else, it's got a really good shark fight. The movie's storyboard approach and the carefully thought-through cinematic camera angles create a wonderfully dark and moody film-going experience. There's a truly original Prison Break movie here about a boy shaped by the tiny hell he was born into and forced to become a merciless machine to survive. What could have been a really typical tough guy is instead a fascinating study of the human condition. It's all about the role our environment plays in shaping our identities and perception as reality. It's easy to think of the society you live in as the way the world is, but that's only because you've never been outside that world. Well, I don't know, maybe you have. Most regular Joes raised in a stable American household don't lock people up in their own basements and force them to read comics about other people who are locked up and spend all their time reading. What kind of person might you turn into if you were born and raised in a prison where pain, starvation, torture, and death were normal and commonplace? Bane is a character my heart breaks for, because he starts out as a kid born with the most rotten luck in the history of rotten luck. Bane wouldn't and couldn't have become Bane without the horrors he experiences in the prison. There's a question as to whether Bane could regain a sense of compassion once he's been molded and then further molds himself into an instrument of death, but he's not the Scorpion in the Scorpion and the Frog story. It's not his nature from birth. Even though he's born in hell, he starts off as an innocent, happy child. The prison is a playground for him. He has a teddy bear, a friend to play with. He has a mother who is, as Zombie says in the narration, wasting away. But the boy has no idea what she's going through or that anything about his life is unusual. The narration says, but the boy was still a boy. He grew, he thrived, he knew no other place. The child has nothing else to compare his world with, and it's only when confronted with death he begins to lose his innocence. First, the death of a man at the knife of another inmate, and then his mother, who gives up on life, becomes ill, and allows herself to die. As early as 6 years old, Bane starts to see life as something earned by strength, only deserved by those who will do anything to hang on to it. Referring to the mother losing herself in the prison, the narration says, hope is a living thing. It must be nurtured. And the same, of course, is true of children. Without that nurture and without the guidance of a compassionate mentor, as his mother might have been to him, were he born under different circumstances, Bane's survival instincts take over and he becomes hardened. But I like that the story takes its time to make Bane's development happen gradually and believably. A really tough job given that Bane's psychology is as extreme and strange as Batman's, and his history is one few people could relate to. Bane doesn't completely change on a dime when his mother dies. He's 6. He doesn't completely understand what's happening, even as it is fundamentally changing how he views the world. Were he taken out of that prison and put in a stable and nurturing home, he would probably grow up and become a functioning member of society. I mean some other not third world society. Santa Prisca is chaos, and I get the sense that revolution was maybe a good idea. Unfortunately, the oppressive government quelched that. But after he's placed in the general population and two inmates fight over him, one hoping to use Bane as his own personal slave and the other trying to protect him, Bane goes over a railing and we're told the boy died that day. And then things take a weird turn that, unless this is expounded upon in later issues, seems totally unnecessary and almost tacked on to give it a more heightened comic booky feel. Bane goes into a coma, and in his dreams, he's visited by an image of himself as an adult. Adult Bane tells Kid Bane that he is destined to become a physical and mental paragon, the living embodiment of human superiority. He even claims Bane has the blood of kings in him, and given how little we're told about his father, pretty much just that he was a revolutionary who was killed for being part of the uprising, I don't know if there's any truth to that or if it's just a dream. Adult Bane tells the child that he can master the world if he can only conquer the one thing that stands in his way, fear. I love the idea that Bane must conquer fear like Batman does to become a scary, almost perverted version of Batman's legend. It's why he was a logical choice as the villain for The Dark Knight Rises and as a protege of the League of Shadows, whose leader also believed in overcoming fear and then using it to manipulate others. Bane becomes a man who is afraid of nothing and becomes the stuff of nightmares, exactly what Batman strives to be perceived as, but not to truly become himself. The difference between them is that once Bane is truly fearless, he loses his conscience, whereas the foundation of Batman's moral code is built on his fear of becoming the evil he fights. But fear in Bane's dream is represented as a bat before he ever hears of Batman, which strikes me as unnecessarily prophetic. Is it a mystical dream? Is some magical entity coming to him from the future? Are we supposed to believe that Bane eventually becomes such a master of his own mind and body that he can transcend human limitations, achieve some sort of ascension like the ancients in Stargate? But even if somehow or rather he does that, doesn't this become a time travel paradox where he has to send himself a vision of himself in the past to even become that pinnacle of self-reliance in the first place? And if it's just his psyche imagining what he could be, the bat image is an eye-roll inducing coincidence that feels like it's just there because we're already a quarter of the way through a comic with Batman's name in the title, and readers might get antsy if they feel like they're reading some other thing for too long. Give us a little credit. Your comic is flawlessly paced and emotionally gripping. I don't miss Batman, and once we get to him, I'm enjoying the story on its own terms, so I'm looking at Batman as Bane's antagonist, or at least the object of his ultimate goal. The story is slightly cheapened by that dream sequence device, but only because it's ambiguous about what it really is and where it comes from. Take out the bat, which is totally arbitrary for Bane if it's not a mystical thing. After all, he's probably never seen a bat and doesn't have any sort of personal connection to it like Bruce does, and it's better. Bane's near-death experience and his being directly threatened by someone who wants to take advantage of him proves to him the validity of the worldview he's already been forming. Kill or be killed. Rule or be ruled. Be the best or be swallowed by the best. I think it's totally reasonable to imagine Bane losing his inhibitions and murdering the Pirates of Darkwater reject without the dream sequence, but it's there to dramatize his internal transformation in a visual medium, which again kind of works if you get rid of the bat and if I know for sure what's going on. Bane gets thrown in solitary confinement for the slaughter, and the warden does everything he can to make it nigh impossible for him to survive his 4,000 days there. This is Bane's crucible, and he uses it to perfect himself, almost grateful for the opportunity to test his endurance, build his strength, and create his own philosophy and set of standards to hold himself to. Though he's not so grateful that he doesn't enact his revenge on the warden later when he escapes the prison, and that's where he murders that shark for good measure. It's actually poetic justice and part of Bane's vengeance, as his mother wasn't given a proper burial when she died and was devoured by sharks. Although I'm not sure if Bane's aware of that. Bane's lonely incarceration parallels Bruce Wayne's 10 years of self-imposed exile, where he goes through grueling mental and physical training, also with the goal of becoming the model of human perfection. When it becomes obvious that Bane can endure anything, he's released from the tiny box that has been his world for over 10 straight years, and he becomes a model prisoner, allowed to work in the library where he learns to read. Once he's proficient, he starts smuggling books into the prison, and he gets an advanced education on the world outside, a world he is still detached from. It doesn't influence him, he simply needs to understand it so he can master it. Like Batman, Bane doesn't allow society or anything else to define him except himself. And what makes him such a challenging foe for Batman is that he does it all totally on his own, except for the help he gets breaking out of prison and the venom serum he eventually puts in his bloodstream. He does it all without Bruce Wayne's money and resources, and he develops every meditation technique and exercise regimen entirely on his own. If it weren't for Bane's coldness and his mortifying view of the world as his reality that we're all just living in, to do with as he pleases, he'd be a hard man for anyone with a sense of ambition and self-determination not to want to emulate. The allure of fulfilling one's full potential, to be more than a sum of your parts, is provocative. It's why I find this batsuit, campy though it may be, so much more comfortable than the Spawn suit. But of course, Bane becomes, fully aware of what he's doing, exactly what Batman fears he could become if he crossed his line. The power we must muster from within can become as dangerous and all-consuming as power from the outside, perhaps more so, as the latter is more fleeting. Bane's last and most important opportunity for change is when he decides to kill the Warden. He didn't have any mercy for Hoggish Greedley either, but he was still a child, suffering from a horrific trauma. This is Bane's ultimate moment to choose between his humanity or self-proclaimed godhood. It's debatable as to whether he has any humanity left at this point, but the somewhat obvious but well-placed symbol of the teddy bear would suggest that Bane makes a deliberate choice. When he drops the bear, which represents his stolen childhood, along with the Warden, that's Bane deliberately abandoning his humanity. I like that the bear goes through stages of disrepair. When Bane is just a child, new to the world and happy to be alive, the bear is clean and whole. But as Bane becomes more psychologically damaged, the bear displays his pain on its body. Something terrible has happened to his mind and his heart. Perhaps Bane could be repaired like the bear, and he makes a choice to remain heartless. Or perhaps he's already past the point of no return because of the life he's already taken, as Batman worries would happen to him. The bear could be patched up, but it would never be the same. I also like being thrust into Bane's world before he tangles with Batman because of the inherent comparisons and contrast to Batman's beginnings. He's the hero of his own story, and it reads like a twisted Batman origin, what Bruce Wayne might have been without his profound attachment to his parents before tragedy struck. He was a boy with everything who watched his world shatter around him in an instant. Bane is a boy with nothing, who has experienced little care and affection when his mother dies. Perhaps nature does win out here after all. We are a sum of our experiences, and Bane is created by his environment. But is that simple human nature? Might Bruce have been exactly the same as Bane if he had gone through what Bane does? It's that Star Trek Nemesis question handled a lot better, and interesting that Tom Hardy has played both Shinzon and Bane. Bruce is desperate for control because he wants to create a world where what happened to him won't happen to anyone else. Bane has come to see people as threats to himself that must be stopped or as challenges to overcome. He wants control because without it, he can be controlled, or worse. Bruce isolates himself willingly, underground, and isn't part of the world in order to change it. Bane was born isolated underground, and once he's developed his own world in his mind, he sees himself as rightful master of it. Each believes in becoming totally self-reliant, yet both curiously rely on advanced technology to achieve their goals. Batman has his gadgets. Bane, again because it's forced on him, takes advantage of the experiments that are done on him, learns to synthesize the venom, and makes it part of him. I somewhat question his deliberately becoming addicted to the substance since he wants to become the epitome of self-determination. That seems like cheating to me, and does strike me a little as a lame explanation for a major element of a character that was decided maybe arbitrarily. It is interesting that he and Batman are both kind of walking contradictions, and I like that Bane achieves his mental and physical prowess and develops his worldview before his mind is affected by the Venom drug. Perhaps that's another example of a line Batman wouldn't cross. He was on the Venom serum before Bane in a story published the same year by Paul Dini called Venom, and of course, he didn't like how vicious and unfeeling it made him, even if it made him a more effective fighter or vigilante in other ways. Perhaps Bane has already made himself such a monster that the Venom doesn't affect him in the same way, that in his mind, it isn't altering him, only enhancing what was already there. And Bane surpasses Batman in several ways. He trains much longer, and again, is entirely self-taught, and he becomes a legend to the prison while in his 4,000-day confinement, as feared and revered as Batman, the legend in Gotham. Once he goes out into the world, like Batman, Bane is also a loner with a singular purpose who surrounds himself with sidekicks because even he can't do everything alone. Batman wrestles with the morality of enlisting others into his war. Bane uses people who are valuable to him to achieve his goals. One of Bane's accomplices is another inmate who's well-versed in science and technology who synthesizes the venom for Bane and just happens to go by the nickname Bird. Bane's Robin. Bane also wears a mask, not to hide his identity but to strike fear in his enemies, and takes the prison he was born in as his own perversion of the Batcave. Oh, and neither really sleeps, but Bane probably gets more rest than Batman since he's meditating all the time. And neither of them really eats. Batman is constantly refusing food from Alfred and seems to subsist on adrenaline and attitude, and Bane lives on venom. maybe he eats too. I don't know. He's got to have an affinity for seafood. It's a complete story, a coming-of-age tale, but also the prologue of a larger piece, as Bane has his first confrontation with Batman, but doesn't yet try to kill him, despite given every opportunity. Bane decides to go after Batman when Bird tells him about Gotham and argues Batman owns it, due to the mystique he's built around himself that has all the criminals afraid of him. Bane decides Batman is the be-all, end-all champion he must defeat to remain self-proclaimed king of the mountain. And it's a little odd that he's immediately interested in Gotham, because that's the first place outside of the prison he hears someone talk about. What if Batman isn't the greatest champion Bane could take down? He doesn't know anything about him, save his name. What if he doesn't even exist? But I guess his coma dreams were haunted by a bat demon that represented every adversity to overcome, so he's instantly obsessed with him. Getting Bane and Batman together is all a little too nice and neat, and feels like it's all about Batman for Bane just because he's in a Batman book. Bird just as easily could have come from Star City or Bloodhaven or Metropolis. Good thing he didn't set Bane on a path to try to take down Superman, or the end of Bane's story might have been really anticlimactic. And then Bane picked up Superman, bent him over his knee, and Superman grabbed him by the legs and took him to jail. Bane is intrigued and perplexed by the one profound difference between he and his attended prey, Batman's refusal to kill. "You will not break the sixth commandment," he tells Batman, and I like the choice of invoking the Bible there, a little proof that Bane is well read. Bane understands the philosophical and moral teachings of various cultures, but they don't reflect, to quote Edison from Star Trek Beyond, the world he was born into. He believes Gotham is a reflection of Batman, that he defines the city, and that he'll understand Gotham if he understands Batman, perhaps an inherently optimistic notion. If Gotham is Batman, it is a dark, seemingly relentless place, but it has a soul. And that's really what Bane has lost that he sees in Batman. His soul. I really expected Bane to go into a typical villain monologue about how mercy is for the weak and Batman's compassion will be his downfall. Bane recognizes that Batman's one rule is perhaps the most important part of his personal philosophy. Like Bane, Batman lives in his own world with his own rules, and Bane wisely doesn't assume anything about Batman's refusal to kill. It might be the key to his defeat, or it might somehow be effective. And of course, Bane will later incorporate that into his own code in a terrifying way when he leaves Batman broken and helpless rather than putting him out of his misery. Vengeance of Bane is an immersive character study and an exciting revenge thriller. The drawing is bold and the visual storytelling deliberate and commanding. I feel like I'm seeing this character with fresh new eyes, and I'm excited to read Nightfall armed with the knowledge about him I gained here. 47 more straight hours of review is a gauntlet I'm not remotely prepared to run, but I'm genuinely looking forward to studying this character further and seeing what new perspective I might gain about Batman finally taking this all in. I'll admit to being tired and overwhelmed by all my unfinished work, and I really don't know if I have it in me, but you want to make me prove myself still worthy of everything I've worked so hard for? Fine. All I can do is my best, so that's what you're going to get. Signed, Captain Logan.